Hello! Welcome to another famous, fabulous episode of the Miss Meyer Show with your host, Miss Meyer. So what we are going to be focusing on today is Chapter 6. So that's what the end of Chapter 6 before we go into Chapter 7. So far, we've talked about Louisiana being part of the early inhabitants with the Native Americans, French Louisiana, and now Spanish Louisiana. So we're finishing that whole Spanish Louisiana part. So this is like the very last bit. So let's get to it. And I think that's going to be, yeah, right here. Okay, so I'm going to start on page 140. We're just going to move all the way through. So this guy, the first guy we're going to talk about is Francisco Louis Hector Baron de Carondelet. Now, there's a Carondelet Street in Louisiana, in New Orleans, where we say Carondelet, right? Not Carondelet, but it is Carondelet. Now, he is considered by historians as the last important Spanish governor. He was born in France as Francois Louis Hector, and he served, in the French military, but he was really close with General O'Reilly and in the Spanish army. And so when O'Reilly came, bloody O'Reilly came over to Louisiana, he brought this dude with him. So he really was a Frenchman who became a Spaniard. Kind of crazy stuff. Now, during this time, Louisiana faced several serious threats under Carondelet. Now, the biggest one was a problem with Spain. Now, Spain had claimed there was this big territory dispute. Spain had gained possession of West Florida in the American Revolution. Now England is totally out of the picture. It's now the American 13 colonies. They are American. And so now this land that once, all this property that once belonged to England is now being separated between France, Spain, and these 13 original colonies. So things are a little different. Yeah, they were all working together to, get rid of their common enemy, England. But now that that was over with, they were going to start the disputes between each other. Now it was going to have some issues. They got rid of their common enemy, King George. Now they're going to start fighting with one another. Now, the problem was that Spain had this West Florida. Now, West Florida is pretty much like your panhandle. Key West, places like that you're going to go, right before you hit Orlando and Disney World. Love Disney World. But this is like your panhandle of Florida. And this was part of Spain's control. Now, Spain also, they had Louisiana at this time. They still had us. We were not French. We are not part of the Union either at this time. So Spain claimed the Natchez as part of West Florida. Now, Natchez was like a little settlement that was in Louisiana. It was one of the first settlements, actually, and it was a military post. So the United States said, no, we claim that. They claimed this boundary, this little area. They said, well, when England left, we took over this part. This is ours. Well, Spain is saying, no, this is ours. And, France is over there saying, hey, Spain, watch, slow your roll. Everything you have over there in Louisiana is really ours. So this big dispute started to come around. The Western Americans, they threatened to attack New Orleans. Now, New Orleans at this time, all the pirates and those crazy things that were going on, Spain pretty much gotten rid of. So they were vulnerable. So when they had these Americans, when they started to say that they were going to attack New Orleans and they were going to secure the Mississippi River, Spain became a little scared. All those people, Jean Lafitte and his Lalligad group, they weren't here yet. So they were really kind of afraid. Now, Spain, in order to protect themselves, they closed the Mississippi River to American trade. And that made a big difference because Spain was controlling the Mississippi River, the mouth of the Mississippi, and New Orleans, they had control over who could go all the way up and down this Mississippi River. Well, these early colonies, these 13 colonies, they relied heavily on the ability to do that so that they could send supplies and things to their other colonies that weren't right next door. So when Spain closed that Mississippi River, this really hurt America where it hurt, and that's the pocketbook. So the Americans were upset that this was happening. They were very, very upset. that this was going on. So in an attempt to settle the disputes, Spain signed the Treaty of San Lorenzo. Now, why do they always call that? The Treaty of San Lorenzo, the Treaty of San Jacinto, the Treaty of Paris, because they're treaties where they're written. So this was written in San Lorenzo, so that's why it's called that. So in this San Lorenzo Treaty, also known as Pinckney's Treaty, it was agreed upon by Spain to set the West Florida boundary at 31 degrees north latitude and to reopen the Mississippi River to American trade. So they basically kind of changed the whole layout of how Florida looked. At this point, that whole, the panhandle look that it's got now, that's because of this. They changed the whole thing to say, okay, this is your section of Florida, this is our section of Florida, let's be friends. That's basically what it is. Kind of like, if I'm making my kids a snack and it's one big donut or something and I break it into pieces and say, okay, this is yours and this is yours and this is yours. Don't kill each other, because they will, especially over Randazzo's donuts. Those of you who are in, I don't know if Randazzo's, they're in Chalmette, they're in Mandeville, they're the bomb. My kids will commit murder for Randazzo's donuts. Okay, and then I just take the whole donut because I'm the dictator, I'm the mom. So anyways, moving on. So Spain also agreed to give the United States the right of deposit in New Orleans for at least 3 years. New Orleans has always been this big port city, and it was very useful for all of these countries because their main mechanism of trade was through river travel and ships and stuff like that. They didn't have railroads and planes and cars and all that. So the way that they were having to get their goods, sell their stuff, do all their stuff was by use of river travel. Now, what the right of deposit means, it means that Americans could use Spanish warehouses in New Orleans to store their goods tax-free, which was a really big deal. And because America at this time, we were a baby country. We did not have the financial ability to be going to pay all these extra taxes. We weren't going to go use England. We just fought a war with them. France was always kind of iffy, they helped us win the war, but we already owed them a ton of money. If it was not for, and I'm going to tell you straight up, if it was not for France and them helping us in the American Revolution, I don't know if we would have won. I really don't. And all of their supplies, all of their things that they gave us, we owed them money for that, for the ships and all those kinds of things. We owed them. So we're not going to go and say, hey, can we store some stuff here and just have kind of like maybe pay you back later? They were like, no, you already owe me enough. No way. So by Spain allowing the American colonies to do this, this really took a huge financial burden off of them. Now, this pretty much, avoided war. It avoided a war that would have been bad for both Spain and the United States. So another threat to Louisiana came from the slave population in New Orleans. Or in Louisiana, excuse me. The slave population had increased considerably due to all the immigration and all of the increase of slaves from Saint Domingue. Now, Carondelet had believed that harsh treatment of slaves might lead to a slave rebellion. And so he established laws that treated slaves more humanely. Before, even this time, slaves were still viewed as property. And I mean, they did have some rights, but it was nowhere near, of a typical person in Louisiana. So Carondelet thought that if they were harsh to the slaves, then the slaves would revolt and take over Louisiana. So he made the rules, the Code Noir, which was under France, easier and not so rough on, the slave population. Well, slaves with this new, easing of the Code Noir, now they were allowed, or they even encouraged, to lodge complaints about their owners at the governor's office. They were allowed to, do things that they were not before allowed to do. So with this new, legislation is the word I want to say, the colony started to turn in turmoil. The slave owners were saying, hey, Carondelet, you can't do this because they're going to turn on me and they're going to kill me. You can't let them do this. And so Carondelet became very, very unpopular with the slave owners in Louisiana. The slaves, some of the slaves started to say, well, you know what? I am not going to work like this. You can't work me, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And if you try and make me do it, I'm going to go and I'm going to file a complaint with the governor's office. So the slave owners were going up to Carondelet and saying, what are you doing here? You're not, what's going on? You can't do this. Kind of like, okay, like my kids, they have chores. And I tell them, you've got to do your chores. And it's kind of like my kids saying to me, hey, you cannot make me do my chores every single day of the week. I'm going to file a complaint against you. Well, I'm their mother, so of course I'm going to say, go ahead and complain. Go ahead. I want to see you complain. But that's what the gist of it was. Slavery was in no way, slavery and slave owner relationship was in no way like a parent-child relationship. But I'm just giving you an example of what was going on. So now with the changes that Carondelet had made to the Code Noir, slaves now had the opportunity to speak up and to say, hey, it's not fair. What they're doing to me is wrong. The slave owners were ticked. And they said, this is my property. You can't do that. You remember, they viewed their slaves as nothing more than property, nothing more than my car or this hairbrush or something, and so for them to speak up and to go complain on them was just unfounded. So authorities learned that some of the slaves around Pointe Coupe were planning a rebellion. So soldiers from Baton Rouge, they wasted no time. They went to Pointe Coupe and where they began making arrests. Now, 23 slaves were hanged and 31 other slaves were flogged so severely that only 4 of them survived. That's how bad. And flogged means beaten. So they did this as an example. They were making an example to the other slaves, saying, if you try and rebel against us, this is what's going to happen to you. So slave owners, they blamed this entire rebellion on Carondelet, and some owners started treating their slaves even more harshly than ever before, just to, to show them, don't you dare try to do this, and Carondelet's not the boss of me. Eventually, Carondelet issued a new policy that put the slaves under the complete authority of all white people. Even that meant that even if someone was not your owner and you went up, and you were a slave in the city of New Orleans or the state of Louisiana, as long as they were white, it didn't matter if they were your owner, they had total control over you and you had, very little say. So it was pretty, in the end, it didn't work out very well. The economics in Louisiana under Spain were much more successful than France. Spain invested more. They proved that their money was well spent, and they were able to supply more food and other economic gains. 3 things that I'm going to talk about when we talk about economics in Spanish Louisiana. And the first one is sugar. Now, sugar cane is something really big. My dad works for Domino Sugar Refinery in Chalmette, so my daddy is the candy man. Not really, but he works for the sugar that supplies the candy. So, that's cool. So sugarcane first was grown for syrup and for rum. The water here was pretty stagnant. People drank it and would get really sick. They would get dysentery. And we all know what dysentery is. That's diarrhea. And they could die from diarrhea from dehydration. So rum was the drink of choice. You couldn't get dysentery from rum. And in order to make rum and to make whiskey and all these other kinds of things, they would need corn, but it wasn't very sweet. They would even give the rum to the kids. It wasn't very sweet, so they started adding sugar to it. So sugar cane was first used. They would take it, cut the stalk off of sugar, boil it down, make it a syrup, put it inside the rum. Well, they became very, very popular, obviously, and more people were demanding this sugar. So manufacturers were, using this sugar. They were started to use it in all kinds of different ways. They started using it as honey or as syrup, as a sweetener, all kinds of things. It became very, very profitable. There was not a lot of spices or additives. You know, if you eat pretty much anything, you're gonna have like preservatives or additives to make it taste better. So sugar was like the first additive that was put into making something sweeter to make people like it. There was not a very advanced system of refrigeration or food storage. So if something started to taste really kind of they would put salt on it, or if it was a meat, or if it was some type of bread or something, you know, they would put sugar on it and say, here you go, eat it. You know, like me, you know, if there's, you know, some bread or something in the pantry and it's got a little bit of mold on it, I just pick it off and say, here you go, you're okay. I really do, you know, it's not a big deal. If the cheese has mold on it, just pick that piece off, throw it off, and you still can eat it. It's penicillin, it's good for you. I have done that, but I haven't done it in a while because my kids caught on to me. They're like, you're feeding us mold. So, but still, you know, really, whatever, you're fine, you'll live. All right, so tobacco. Although the fur trade continued, that was like the big thing. That was the big major thing. We started to see tobacco. Now, tobacco starts forming as you know, something that they were using for many things, and eventually it came to be the big tobacco industry that we have today. But back then they used it as many things. Tobacco is a plant, and it is the leaves of that plant. I don't know the process. I think that they do something with the leaves and they make that into the tobacco. In its peak years, there was almost 1 million pounds of tobacco that were exported from Louisiana. For real, that's a lot. Land grants. So toward the end of Carondelet's term, Spain gave a large land grant to the Marquis de Maison Rouge. I just love French. I love the way French sounds. Okay, Maison Rouge, he promised to bring in hundreds of settlers, but only a few families came because word was out, y'all. Everybody knew Louisiana was not what they portrayed it to be. It was not this amazing colony. It was not any of that. Word had gotten out and people did not want to come here. So even though, you know, Maison Rouge had all this land, he had a really difficult time trying to get people to come here. The following year, the Spanish gave perhaps the largest land grant in Louisiana history to the Baron de Bastrop. Now, Bastrop wasn't really a nobleman, but Spain granted him over 1 million acres, and that contained even today's modern-day Morehouse Parish and West Carroll Parish. Now, like Maison Rouge, Bastrop promised to bring in a lot of settlers, but he failed to deliver as well. People did not want to come here. They were saying, hey, come on over, it's great, it's great. Let me give you this example. Your parents probably know this. Okay, if you go anywhere, like any vacation destination, there's going to be people that are standing out saying, hey, if you'll come listen to our speech about our timeshare opportunity, we'll give you $100. No way. That's horrible. Don't do it. It's terrible. You'll sit there for hours and they will belittle you and berate you until you buy into their timeshares. It's not worth it for $100. So these people were thinking the same thing. What? I'm not going to Louisiana so you give me free land? Are you crazy? No way. Just like my husband tells me, if you sign up for another one of those timeshare talks, I'm going to he's going to go berserk. I've done it to him enough times. So when I was in Disney this past week, they had people saying, hey, would you like to have a free 3-night stay at one of our premium resorts if you attend a meeting about our vacation club? I was like, no. Okay. So that's what was going on. These people didn't care. They didn't care what you had. They can't bring people over here. So neither Maison Rouge nor Bastrop met their quotas. They could not get people to come here. They did bring more families to the colonies, but not enough to populate it, and definitely not enough to meet the quota. So some Americans came over, some French, some Spanish, but not nearly enough they needed that they would make a profit of Louisiana. So in an event that became known as the French Revolution was going on, Napoleon Bonaparte was coming on the scene. Now, in the beginning of the French Revolution, Napoleon wasn't there. He was just a soldier. This guy named Robespierre started riling up the French and all the working class French and saying, hey, look at us, we're working, we're starving in the streets, and our king is over there, he's, Louis the XVI giving money to America when his own people are starving. Now, King Louis the XVI and Marie Antoinette, they were giving money to Louisiana to fund the French Revolution. The American Revolution. The French absolutely hated England. And when Louis saw that we were fighting them and we had the possibility of beating them, he started sending supplies over to America. Well, by doing this, his own people in France were saying, what about us? We're your own people. Why aren't you giving us help? And when they saw that the Americans stood up to King George, their ruler, they said, hey, you know what? I bet we could stand up to our ruler. Now, when we did it and we just broke away. When the French did it with Robespierre and all that, they killed the king and they killed the queen and they starved their little boy to death and they killed a lot of people. Ugh, look at this piece of hair. It's driving me mad. They killed a lot of the aristocracy. They murdered them. They cut off their heads. The guillotine was invented for this. The guillotine, that thing, that was created to be a quick and painless way of death. That's what it was. And efficient and fast. There were so many people who were going to the guillotine that they needed some type of killing mechanism that could do the job like that. So the guillotine was invented. The problem is that they used the guillotine so often that the blade started to dull and the heads would not get chopped off completely. So it would take sometimes 3 tries before a head would completely come off. So you would get one chop and the head would be like, and then the third chop. It's crazy. It's crazy, crazy. But that was what's going on. Now, the French Revolution raged for 10 years, and it totally affected the colony of Louisiana. Louisiana's French population that were in here, remember, they considered themselves French. They totally didn't care. They didn't say they weren't Spanish. They weren't Louisianians. They weren't Americans. They weren't anything. They were French. And they, we're calling their friends over and saying, hey, we see what's going on over in France. Come over here to Louisiana. So we're actually able to grow our population with the French Revolution. Now, Louisianians, the Creoles, the Cajuns, they didn't like these people that were coming from France. They didn't like them. So they started to have disputes between Creoles, Cajuns, the foreign French, the Spanish, the Isleños, and the native Louisianians. There was never a lot of camaraderie going on there. It was always kind of like that. Okay? Okay, sorry. I have something in my shoe. It's a hair tie. Okay, so now you had all of this, this kind of upheaval between the groups. But despite it, many of the Creoles supported the revolution, and its goal was to improve life for the French citizen. So crowds were marching through the streets of New Orleans. They were all for the French Revolution. I mean, you would have thought this was revolutionary France. It was all kind of crazy stuff. Revolutionary societies, they sprang up. They even talked of rebellion. Carondelet was getting really scared. He's like, man, I hope they don't come over here and think they're going to guillotine my head. So it was really, really scary. So Carondelet, he believed that the colony was on the verge of a revolt and brought in soldiers and strengthened New Orleans' defenses. And he started arresting people, that were responsible for this whole revolt. Remember, these are the same people that had the voodoo doll of Eula and burned it in front of his house. So Carondelet's like, no way. Okay? So the French Revolution comes to an end, kind of. The Reign of Terror, which is what it was called when they were getting all their heads chopped off. And the guy by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, Napoleon came on the scene as a soldier. He was basically he wasn't this huge aristocracy type guy. He wasn't a prince or a leader or whatever. He rose through the ranks. He was a soldier, and the people really liked him, especially the other soldiers. He became very, very popular, all the way to becoming France's dictator, basically. He crowned himself dictator. He made himself Caesar, basically. Okay? He was very, 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 very intelligent, but he was a little cuckoo. And the reason that he always kept his hand in his shirt pockets because he had a little bit of a deformity with his hand. It's true. And he was little. Very little bitty guy. So, By the turn of the century, Napoleon had this idea of making France this major empire, like Rome. You know how Rome wanted to own everything? England wanted to be this major empire. France, Napoleon wanted it as well. Now, he decided that he was going to, take over all these places. He wanted to get money for his empire building scheme by turning Saint Dominique, which is an island, into a huge sugarcane plantation. And there was one problem. So if Saint Dominique was going to be turned into this huge sugar plantation, he needed lots of slave laborers. He needed people to do the work. So where was he going to get all these people? All the young, able-bodied men he needed to fight in his French army. So where was he going to get all of these people to do his labor over at his sugar plantation? Louisiana! We were the answer. So in the fall of 1800, Napoleon forced Spain to give them back Louisiana. Spain, at this point though, Spain was like, take it, good riddance, wash my hands, goodbye. So now France had control of Louisiana. And when France has control, it is now under the control of Napoleon. So Napoleon used our people as basically his workforce. Louisiana gave France back Louisiana. I'm sorry. Spain gave France back to Spain gave Louisiana back to France with the Treaty of San Ildefonso. Now, Napoleon, he promised a bunch of things to Spain, did not keep any of them. Said, I'll make you, whatever. I'm going to make you some royal guy. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you that. Didn't do any of it. But Spain, honestly, at that point, they were too weak to fight him, number one. And number two, they just didn't care. Okay, so we're finishing off. Sorry, I had to go run and get my kids from school. So Napoleon planned to keep this whole treaty secret of getting Louisiana back from Spain. Until he had enough soldiers in Louisiana to protect it. He allowed the Spanish to continue running the colony, but rumors about this treaty soon spread. Like they were all talking about it. It was like the talk of the town, right? So President Thomas Jefferson in the United States at this point became very, very concerned. France was a powerful nation in Europe, and Napoleon now was pretty neck and neck with England and having lots of issues. As thousands of French soldiers started to go into the colony of Louisiana, Jefferson started to panic because they were so close to the 13 colonies that were expanding. Vivian, lower it! So when our next time in class video, we're going to talk about the Louisiana Purchase and how America acquires the state of Louisiana and how we become a state in the entire Union. So that's all I've got for you guys. See you. Hi guys, this is my allergy test. It's not that bad. Shh. Oh my god. gosh, you see how it reacted? Or that's just horrible. All of those for real? Mm-hmm. Oh, that one was good. I think I'm working myself off the moves. Oh, you the two! Oh my gosh! This is bleeding. Okay.
You okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Facebook.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You can scream all you want as long as you sit still.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. We will still how many more? How many more?
After this one, 3. We're almost done.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's like a tender area. That really hurts. Yeah. No, mommy's okay. Yeah, mommy's got a bobo.
Have one more.
Oh my gosh. Okay, wait. Okay. All right, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Dr. Page is gonna.
Vivian, what's the code word this week?
Busy door.
What?
Busy door.
A busy door?
Busy door.
Dizzy door?
Mhm.
So the code word is dizzy door?
Mhm.
Okay. Say bye.
Bye.
You both kiss?